Hi friends, it's me, Morgan Ruff, and this is another episode of Uplift Conversations. Well, these all came out of the fact that I've really noticed there's just a tad bit of stress in our world right now. So much uncertainty and overwhelm, and yeah, I've been feeling it. And I think for many of us who've been serving in the role of societal change makers, we might have already been feeling run down and burned out, overwhelmed, maybe even unsure of how we were moving forward. And then we've added a global pandemic on top of that, and we're being asked to juggle even more. And oh boy, it's a lot. If you're feeling stressed or anxious or worried or depressed, or maybe you're just feeling all the feelings all at the same time, that's sort of like me, it's okay. You're not alone. These conversations are really my way of supporting this very, very uncomfortable growth period that so many of us are being forced into. So I just thought, well, why don't we explore all those simple life hacks, deep woo-woo, self-care, and what it means to be really growing in this period of change and uncertainty, and see what comes of them. I just wanted to give a shout out and say, we don't have to do this work alone. There is so much we can learn together. And if you want more, consider jumping over to my Facebook group, Uplift for Passionate Changemakers, where even more great stuff is being stirred up and brought forward. So today I'm super excited to introduce this conversation with my dear friend, Brook Todd. Brook is so compassionate. She is so understanding, and she's bringing 20 plus years of working with children as a speech therapist into this whole new light. Now, I have noticed in the past, 3 or 4 weeks, obviously there's so much going on for our kids. And for us, that translates into really wacko behaviors, like crazy regressions, things that we thought we'd gotten through that have really changed. And I reached out to Brooke actually because I was so overwhelmed by some of the meltdowns that we were experiencing and a lot of the changes that were happening. And she sat down with my husband and we talked about what was going on, and we came up with some solutions that we've been implementing, and it has really truly changed the dynamic in our house. What I love is that the way Brooke talks about this work, it's not about changing your children. It's not about changing what they're doing or how they are. It's about adapting yourself so that you can look and listen at the behaviors that they are demonstrating and showing, and like see them truly as a language. What are they trying to communicate to you? So moving away from like this discipline and you're being bad, go sit in the corner, and more toward like, okay, what's going on? What is this experience? And how can we help them to adapt or find some different coping mechanisms? So Brooke brings so much compassion. She brings so much expertise, and has really been such a huge help to us. And I really appreciate all that she shares in this podcast, and I hope that you enjoy it too. So enjoy. All right, we're here. We're recording. Welcome, Brooke. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm really excited to dive into our conversation. Can you just tell me more about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my name is Brooke Todd. I'm actually a speech language pathologist. That is my background. I'll be 20 years next month practicing speech therapy, all pediatrics. So I've spent my career working with children from basically under the age of 2 to up to 18. So I do own a practice outside of Atlanta. We do speech and occupational therapy. And right now we're teletherapy practitioners during the shutdown, which has been quite a learning curve, but amazing ways to connect with our families. But about 2 years ago, after doing a lot of personal work myself, I developed a program that I'm very proud of, and I love to share with other people. But it's all around behavior. And as a speech therapist, I didn't study behavior. I am not a behavior analysis analyst. But when you go into people's homes for pretty much about 16 years, which is where I spent a good part of my career up until now, is doing home-based services. So I was in people's homes sometimes twice a week, and you really get to see what goes on in people's families when you go into their home on a weekly basis. And I was spending a majority of my therapy time talking to moms. And, sometimes it was the days where they just needed another adult to talk to that day. I might be the only adult that they had contact with. And then some days it was serious questions, and it was always rooted in speech or some type of language, but always behavior. There was always a root issue that they were trying to figure out why their child was behaving the way that they were. So slowly but surely, I kind of started putting the pieces together and started a program called the Language of Behavior. So it's based on getting to the root causes of why our children do the things they do or exhibit the behaviors that they do. And I believe truly that behavior is a language. It's how our children are communicating to us. And that's not always with words. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's their bodies. Sometimes it's even just their need, the need to connect or need for calm, that I find are the root causes. So yeah, I've been offering this program now for a couple of years, and it's been a lot of fun. A lot of fun.
That's so cool. And I've learned so much from you. And what I have been able to see the shift in me is when I start looking at the behavior or the misbehavior that my child might be exhibiting as trying to communicate or tell me something that they maybe don't have the words for, versus, you're being bad or you're bothering me. When I'm able to shift it into like, what are they trying, curiosity of like, what are they trying to tell me? It helps me stay so much calmer and out of reactivity, and hopefully in a more supportive role for my kids.
Absolutely. I feel like I'm a broken record sometimes when I tell parents this, but it's all about perspective sometimes. And even going back to like what you were just saying about misbehavior, behavior in itself, the definition is just something that you do. We already, I think as parents in our mind, when we hear behavior, we're thinking the bad stuff, right? The yelling, the screaming, the hitting, all of that. But behavior is just something that you do. So if you are looking at it from a perspective of what is my child doing, right? Not good, not bad, just a neutral action. And then you can kind of be the detective. And sometimes it's a matter of working backwards, right? Like what precipitated this, quote, behavior? What is the setting? What's going on? So, and in that way, you are kind of like a little bit of a behavior analysis detective. But if I can help a parent at least pinpoint some of those triggers, some of those precipitating situations, that can be such a tremendous perspective changer. Because, for instance, if kids get overwhelmed in loud environments, right? If you can nail that down, you're going to know that this is something that your child may not handle as well as we would like them to, for whatever reason, whether it's a sensory issue or, whatever. But at least your perspective on that behavior isn't that your child is just trying to be bad. Like, yeah. I say this all the time too. I truly believe this, that no child wakes up and decides that morning like, today I'd just like to be a big, huge pain. Like, I just want to cause all this trouble in my family. Like, I don't believe that they consciously choose to do the behaviors that we, consider negative.
Right.
I do feel like there's always a cause for that. There's always,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. And, the other thing that I've really learned from you, sorry, I'm thinking here, is like how to see the behavior coming and then kind of figure out ways to redirect or help support. Like, oh gosh, like, with my youngest, we have these like very explosive
Mm-hmm.
times. And after our conversations, like, I've come to see them as like, she's looking like she'll be pushing really hard against us, or like kind of like hitting.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of yelling at her and putting her in timeout, if we can catch it before it goes into the full blown just
Yeah.
blah meltdown, we got this like room now where we take her down and we like push her onto a mat, and it's just this like sense of like falling or slamming into stuff, and it's amazing how it calms her down. And I don't know whether it's it might be one part the sensory stimulation and one part just that really direct time that we're having with her of
Sure.
like we're really connecting with her.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The sensory component of behavior is fascinating. I always used to say, like, I would never want to go back to school and do another degree, but if I could, I would be an occupational therapist. So I'm a wannabe in a lot of ways, but I've seen, honestly, through my own therapy with my clients, there's always this funny, I do a lot of early intervention, so that's 3 and under. And it's always this funny perspective when someone who maybe isn't quite as aware of the sensory component of learning tells me as a speech therapist, oh, they're not ready to do speech yet because they can't sit still. And I'm like, wait a second, just because you can't sit still doesn't mean you're not ready to learn how to communicate. And your body is one of the first things as a child, as a baby, that you use to communicate. Babies, when they're excited, their whole body, just shakes and vibrates, or, you get the arching back when things aren't going so well. So their bodies are actually their first communicators as it is. So I think we don't give children a lot of credit as they get older. If they're using their body to communicate the behavior, we sometimes consider that to be bad. Right? You can't sit still. Well, that just means that you must have an attention disorder.
Right.
There are reasons why your body maybe is communicating that, and it all goes back to your nervous system. We all have one, and sometimes our nervous system doesn't work the way that we want it to, or the way we expect it to. And again, for children, theirs is still developing. There are things that their nervous system doesn't know how to handle yet. And sometimes in your case, like for your daughter, that need for that kind of heavier or more intense physical input, that's her nervous system's way of using her body to communicate, to say, I need more of this.
Yeah.
When we as parents sometimes see that, like you said, as a negative thing, and then we want to stop it. We want to, put an end to it. Go to timeout. You need to stop. Well, that's actually the opposite of what that nervous system, if you really look at it, not your child, sometimes it literally their nervous system needs that hard physical input. So yeah, we can talk a lot about sensory. I love it.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I think for me, one of the things that happens when my child is having that like physical need or the stronger behavioral actions is that my ability to cope with my own triggers is heightened, and so I start to feel all my stuff come up, and it's like,
oh yeah,
it's like she's the wind, and it just starts fueling the fire of my
That's a great analogy. Yeah, no, so much of a great analogy, and that's exactly why, as part of the program. So when parents inquire about the program, I know what their intentions are typically, and they're good intentions. They want to help their child, right? But a lot of times helping our children doesn't mean just finding a fix and saying, okay, you as another person, you fix them or you do this. It really does start with the parent. And I don't always get the best reception when I say, first, first, we're going to start with you. And it's not like you're wrong, we need to fix you, you've done something wrong. It's not a judgment at all, but you exactly nailed it. If we as parents can't come from a place of calm or have our own nervous systems, right, in a good place, then how are we going to expect our child to either learn from us as models, or not to, like you said, push us over the edge or start that fire when we're already kind of, burning ourselves. So that's a huge component of the program. And I think that, again, it goes back to perspective. If you are seeing your own behavior in a different perspective or a different light, in that you can feed your child sometimes, good or bad, right? Our energy, our how we show up is definitely impacting on our children. I think right now, especially, is such a like little capsule of like experiment time. It's kind of weird to look at it that way, but there's a lot of anxiety there right now. There's a lot of, just uncertain feelings. And it's no wonder our kids are, whether they're verbalizing it or not, they're feeling it. They pick up on that. I just listened to a Brene Brown podcast this morning, and, she was talking about anxiety and how contagious, anxiety is. And whether you're saying it out loud to your child that you're worried or you're anxious, they feel it. And their behavior will then in turn show it.
Yeah, and that's true for young kids as well as the older kids. Yeah.
Absolutely. They just don't have the same way of showing it. And sometimes they do. I mean, to be honest, like, I've shared this in my private Facebook group. My daughter is 12 next month. She's sleeping on the floor of our bedroom right now. And, I don't look at it as, oh my God, my daughter is, she's going to be on our floor till she's 16. Right now that's what she needs. Now, did she say in words, Mommy, I don't feel safe, I need to lay on the floor? Not really. It was just this kind of like, can I be in here? She would stay in our room a little longer at night. Bedtime's kind of off a little bit right now. And then I just said, why don't you make a pallet on the floor and sleep? And it was like, you could just feel this like sigh of relief from her. And again, I don't think it's a permanent thing, but I think it's what she needs right now. And I think that's what makes it so much more difficult for parents to deal with, behaviors for their children right now, as we as parents are under so much stress as it is. And then on top of it, we're having to understand, and just sometimes I think it just goes back to connection. Like that's one of the components of my program. It's a huge component of it. And whether that's a physical connection, because I know we've discussed previously, and I've heard a lot of people, within my personal group or even personal circle, they're like, what's happened? My child wants to literally be like glued to me 24 hours a day. The sleeping back in the bed with the parent. It's a regression in some ways, right? The behavior is regressing, but there's usually, again, that root cause. And I feel like it's connection, and it may not be physical. It could be more of an emotional, just safety and security that I think that we all want, and kids just are seeking it in different ways.
Yeah. And you shared that great article, and I'll kind of link it here about kind of this regression that many people are experiencing with their children. It's like this, they're kind of like marching back until they want to climb back into the womb. And
I mean, it's true. It's the safest place to be, right? So, and
it's a lot for moms and dads that are also feeling the anxiety and the stress. And, this whole experience has been fascinating because, some of us have like lost jobs and we're in this kind of financial turmoil. Other of us have had to continue working plus taking care of our kids. And then other people are alone and in their house. It's just, there's so many different ways that we are all experiencing this, but we're all experiencing disruption and some amount of trauma that is related to it. And, our kids are just,
they're a part of it. And it's just like, if we, I always like use, now is a good time to use these kinds of examples, but I kind of point out to parents, I'm like, you have a bad day sometimes, right? You get upset with other people, you get frustrated, and our kids do the same. They just may not show it in the same ways that we do. So right now, more than ever, we're frustrated. We're going to have an outburst, right? We're going to get, something little may set us off. And we wonder why our child, when, they can't get the Lego to fit just right, has a fallout fit. It's just that last straw that, you know, maybe they've been trying to hold it all together too. So I feel like it's such a good time, like you said, if you are home and we do have this, you know, different dichotomy going on, to be able to put some of these practices into place, like you're doing with your daughter, with having a space that's just for her to be able to get some of that physical input that she's looking for. You know, luckily the weather's, you know, getting nicer, hopefully around the country, where kids need to get outside. You know, I mean, we always talk about it. They're in school how many hours a day? Here's the chance. Like, outside time is so important for just connecting, and then them feeling that sense of calm our nervous system needs. So yeah, I think it's an opportunity in many ways to see what it would be like to try some of these strategies.
You know, another thing that that article talks a lot about is creating structure in your day. And you know, I personally struggle with structure because I just kind of want to do whatever I want to do when I want to do it. And I want my kids to follow the structure that works for me.
Sure.
And so, you know, I've created a visual schedule that, you know, I'm trying to get them involved in helping to figure out what the flow of our day is.
Yeah.
And, you know, some days they really like it. Other days they really don't. And I just sort of like allow it to be what it is, not forcing it. But what are some other like tricks? I mean, I don't know if maybe people don't know what a visual schedule is, but maybe could you talk a little bit more about creating structure with younger kids versus older kids?
Sure. And it's such a funny thing, because, you know, you don't always remember what you preach. You don't always practice what you preach. And we had a couple weeks of, you know, digital learning starting and that kind of thing. And then I was building up again with my own caseload. And then I it just was like, hit me the week before last. I'm like, oh my gosh, my daughter is spending way too much time on a screen. Because, you know, digital learning, obviously that's a given. And then it was like iPad time and her behavior that was, you know, hers is usually exhibited in just really moody behavior, impatient, you know, that kind of thing. I'm sure I'm not alone. And I looked at my husband, I'm like, oh my God, we need a schedule for her. Like, you know, hello. And for us, you know, it does. I'm like you, Morgan. I do have a schedule, but I do like to have like some flow within the schedule. And it depends on the age of the child, but I think it's so key to have them involved in what it is. But to the point, even like I said, my daughter's 12 next month, there's still sections of the day that I do have things that I want her to do. Now she can choose within there, but, you know, I do something creative. Like that's something that and I personally like to have just big blocks of time. I feel like in this situation that we're in, if you're scheduling every minute, you know, down to the hour, it's not sustainable. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. I don't feel like that's a sustainable situation right now, because honestly, things are changing every day as it is, right? And I don't think our kids are going to like jump on board when it's like every day I'm going to do the same thing. I think some variety is definitely needed. So for older kids, I just like for her, I just use a whiteboard or you know, like a dry erase, and I just put off chunks of time. And the morning is when she gets to the digital learning, you know, done. And then I make sure that she visually sees that there are breaks, right? Like we break for lunch. And then I try to plug in some things that, again, whatever that root cause or that root need that they have, I try to make sure that that's something that is included in that schedule. So for us, it might be she loves to go outside and do stuff together. So whether that's going outside for 30 minutes and hitting the tennis ball, you know, and it's physical. She's a very physical kid too. So I always try to make sure that that's something that's involved. Like if I told her we're going to read a book together for 30 minutes, nope, that's not going to fuel her, and it's not going to reward her either in that way. So, but for younger kids, I think visual, like you said, it's So key. So I know you had done, like little picture, like if you're a good artist, great, you can draw those pictures, but
I'm not a good artist, it's stick figures.
so, but even like super young children, and this goes across the board for any skill or anything that they're learning, a real picture is so important, I think, because they don't have the same type of abstract, understanding that we do. So even sometimes stick figures don't represent the same thing,
Yeah.
for them that does for us. So just taking some pictures with your phone around the house, whether it's making sure that in the morning, like 2 things, that they brush their teeth, and that they eat breakfast. And it gives them, I think, just that reference of normal, normalcy, that this is just something that I would normally do. But then I think in these cases when we're in a different time, we're in uncharted, territory, mixing up the activities. So I've actually worked with a family during this quarantine whose child also needs a good bit of physical, input. And so basically she has 3 visual choices for him. And one of them might be like, they have the punching bag, like in their basement, like that's one option.
Yeah.
And then he loves, like, we decided that he really thrives on like obstacle courses, things that he has to like physically use his body to maneuver, but also use his mind too. So he can choose an obstacle course, right? And then I forget the third choice, but it's something else that he has a say-so in. But we know during this block of time, like say when the sister he has needs to do digital learning, he's going to be doing something that meets his needs and can help kind of curb some of that afternoon crazy behavior that his mom was experiencing, right? And so she's trying to work, she's trying to help her older child digitally learn, and then this other child that's younger is seeking so much physical input. So kind of killed a lot of birds with one stone. So
Yeah, I think that's so great. And like you can just have like I think I got a little I overdid it and I put too many options on the table. So
good point.
So
Yeah.
I've started to just be like, okay, do you want this or this? Like just 2 options.
2 to 3. I think
Yeah.
3 is probably tops for most kids.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same philosophy that I used to go into houses and do therapy a lot. And they're, we're just all good parents. We buy our children like way too many toys.
Yeah.
And the parent would say, well, they don't play with any of these toys. And the first thing I would say is take almost all of them away, but like 5.
Yeah.
And like that, they start playing, because we get like overloaded with choices as adults. Children do too. And when there's too many choices, they can't make the choice. So yeah, 2 to 3 is really nice. And then, make them things that they can look forward to, because I think when these days seem even longer, for parents and for kids, they need to have these activities to kind of look forward to. Yeah,
one of the things that I'm struggling with is, I'm creating these beautiful, enriching like field trips, and to it's our local park, but it's a pretty cool park.
Mm-hmm.
But then we get there and they're like, when do we get to go home and play on the Kindle? Or when do we get to go home? Or like sugar is a huge motivator in our house.
Yeah.
They just like want to consume sugar like 24/7.
Right.
So I think it's been an interesting experience for me, because here I'm like, oh yay, nature mama school and like all these great things, but also recognizing that like they're processing a lot, and sometimes they just need to like have their own way of comforting themselves, and that might not be the way I want it to be.
Right. And that's so true. I mean, in this time and in any time, our kids are their own unique individual beings, and what calms us or what brings us, our kind of peace may not be the same. And that's where we get into, I talk about this a lot in the program, when parents are saying, my child's, especially at night, bouncing off the walls, they're jumping on the bed, they're doing and when I maybe show them that this is actually your child's way to calm themselves, they're like, what? No, mine is reading a book and laying in bed or having a cup of tea, right? But that's not your child. You have a different nervous system than they do. And so I find that, sometimes there's this like mismatch of what we consider to be our calming activities, or even the things that we like to do to connect. So it's really all about learning what works for your child and finding a balance because, they can't be on screens or eat sugar 24 hours a day.
Much as they
Um,
want it.
right. And I know everybody, the screen thing is a huge thing. And in my house, it is too. I think it's finding that kind of, again, balance, that magic amount that's not too much. Like, I mean, I've seen studies as little as 20 minutes is like max, depending on the age. For right now, we're giving our daughter an hour and that can be spread out throughout the day or at one time. But after about an hour, like I see a big change in just in her attitude and her being, and so I think it does need to be limited, but yet, yeah, mix it up a little bit. So,
Yeah. And also, I think there's a little like self-compassion if it does go over that limit that you set for yourself or for your kids. Like we're living in very different times right
it
now.
is. It is. I know. It's so funny. Do you have the thing on your phone where it's like it pops up weekly, like you had da 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 how many hours or
Yeah.
whatever. And I was surprised. I thought for sure, like, oh my God, it's probably going to be so much. And it's been down the last like 3 weeks. It's been down, and I'm like, really? But we as adults are able to make that kind of bound or set that boundary. Like I did about 3 weeks ago. Like I cannot look at every news article that comes across, on Facebook. I cannot watch every video because you have to set those mental boundaries or
Right.
you're going to get down that rabbit hole really fast. And I think for children, they don't have that emotional intelligence yet to know when's enough, right? Or even if it's, obviously they're not reading negative news articles, but even just, the mindless kind of watching of things that they don't understand. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's been an interesting shift in trying to figure out, going from like no devices to suddenly like education is on a device and
Yeah. And this is the way. I know. And you were saying about, just them wanting to go to the next thing. I feel like we're still in a space of deprogramming, right? Because it wasn't a month ago that, at least in my house, my daughter was in school full time, right? Every day. We went straight to an activity 4 days a week. We weren't home sometimes until 8 o'clock at night. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh wow, all this time. But it's truly a reprogramming that I feel like our kids, and this is just how we've lived in our society for so long, is what's the next thing? What's the next thing, right? We've almost set them up in some ways for that. And now we have this time to breathe and be like, let's enjoy what we're doing. And then we'll go on to the next thing. But that's still hard for them, I think, to do as well.
Yeah, they're really having to shift the way that they are kind of in the world. And
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I have kind of a philosophical question for you.
I'll do my best.
This is coming. So if this experience could be a reset in the way that our society is, what would be the thing that you would really hope changes for our future? And I mean, this question comes out of the sense of like, I want us to start visualizing together or sharing this vision of what a better future might be. Because in my mind, what we were doing pre-COVID wasn't sustainable, and it wasn't healthy for ourselves and our families and our society and our earth. And so how would we use this opportunity as a global reset? And what would be the thing that you think is most important for us to change as we move forward?
So, gosh, great question. I do think it is an opportunity. I know there's so many horrible things going on in the world, but as families, I do feel like that there are going to be a lot of positive shifts. And if I had the way of choosing which one it would be, it would. I go back to connection. It I think is so key. And we were talking about before you started recording, many times as parents pre, quarantine, we're physically there, but we're not emotionally or mentally there, right? Our minds are going 100 miles an hour. We're thinking about everything else that we have to do. And like a silly example is like laundry. Like I do laundry on Saturdays. That's what I do because I don't want to do it during the week. I'm working and we have activities. And it's like in the last 2 weeks, I've just kind of been like, I don't need to do the laundry today because I've got another day and I can spend this time going outside and doing where normally on the weekend, I might limit myself literally, like, well, I have to do this, this, and this inside. So I can't go outside and do these things with my daughter that she really wants me to do. And the reason she wants me to do them is just to connect and to have that secure feeling that she needs. And I found just relaxing some of these to-dos has been huge. Like, I feel like that's something that we can take away from this whole time period, that if the laundry doesn't get done on Saturday morning, the world isn't going to end. And I would have gained so much more by connecting with her and doing the thing that she wanted to do. Right. I've put myself on, like, I've learned a lot of things that I didn't think I wanted to learn, but they connected with her. I am not a computer game person. Like, it's just not something that entertains me. She loves to play Minecraft. It's kind of like a new thing. And all of a sudden, I've learned to play Minecraft. And I do it because she wants me to be there with her and experience it with her. So I think that's what we're going to take out of this.
I love that. And I think there's that connection, but a part of that is it's almost like saying no to things, like allowing yourself more space and being very clear and intentional about the time that you do have, and
absolutely
not taking on so much that we are so jam-packed that we have to keep going.
So true.
Yeah, I love that. I lost you. Okay, minor technical issue. We're back. All right, so can you just talk a little bit more about your language of behavior program? Is that open right now? Like, can people?
Yeah, definitely. So the language of behavior program, it's a 5-month program where you actually are going through the modules as a parent on a monthly basis. And then we are actually meeting via Zoom. Lately have been a little more frequent than the typical schedule, but usually on average I am with the parent an hour and a half for one-on-ones, and then we do check-ins every other week just to see how things are going. And it's so funny because at first when I started this program, because of the nature of how I had provided my own speech services for so long, I was doing in-home. I was going into the home, working with the families, and then we would do check-ins, just via like a Zoom. And obviously things have changed, and it had already started to make this organic kind of change because I was being able to work with more families that weren't right in my area. So it's all virtual now. And parents will ask a lot of times, well, don't you have to see my child? Don't you have to see them, quote, misbehave? And I'm like, nope. I'm working with you. And it really is. It's all about working with the parent. And what I'm asking them to do is really, they're kind of being like I said, the detective for me. So I teach them how to keep what's called a behavior log. It's very simple, very easy, but that's the story that I need for them to tell me. Their child is going to be able to let me know everything that's going on through that behavior log. And then we start to look for any patterns, any, like you said, triggers, things that we're noticing on a regular basis that may be the child's reason that they're exhibiting this behavior. But the modules are what really, I think, hopefully teach the parent how to start recognizing if the child is using behavior to communicate, to connect, or to find their calm. And once we've gone through those modules and they have a better idea of what this kind of behavior looks like and why they might be exhibiting it, then we start putting that plan into place. kind of like I've been able to do with you guys about, all right, it's a physical need. We need to deal with this on a physical level. And a lot of times it's not even a physical need, it's an emotional need. And we need to work on an emotional level. So it's really fun because I feel like the parents gain a lot of perspective on themselves, right? They learn that they may not be a physical seeker for connection, right? It's funny because I noticed that dads tend to be the more like physical, like they like the rough housing, that kind of play, which for some children is perfect. And then for some, it's not about the physical, it's more about that emotional. And I find moms to be a little bit more on that emotional connection side. So yeah, it's a big perspective shift for everybody. And I feel like it's just valuable for the child to then have much more awareness. That's a huge component of it too. Through the parent, we're teaching the child to be aware. When my body starts to feel kind of like, and this is when I need to, whatever it is, get that physical input, have that connection with my mom or dad. So it's kind of two-pronged. So yeah, but it is open. I'm definitely seeing more interest right now because it has come to light. And these are situations where, unfortunately, when they're not in school, not to say this happens all the time, but it's hard when a parent hears this is what's happening at school, but they don't want to admit it happens at home too, right?
Yeah.
And this is a good opportunity, I think, to say, you know what, this is an issue across the board, and so we're going to just deal with it. And yeah.
What type of families do you work with? Like, is there a specific age range that you tend to target, or?
I don't have a specific age range, and I do tell most people, just because my background is working with children that have special needs, I definitely don't limit, the families that I work with to children with special needs. I feel like that's almost like a different category in itself. So typically my families that I work with, their child, it does not have any kind of diagnosis or particular special need. And age ranges, the only age range that I haven't quite tackled, and this is for me personally too, is the teenage years. It's quickly approaching at my house.
Pretty soon you'll be an expert, yes.
I was going to say, so I might need a little more personal experience there, but no, I'm open to anything. And I usually ask parents to just get on a call. We'll do a consult. If it's a good fit, and you feel like it's something that would serve you, then let's do it. And, sometimes it's not. It needs to be a commitment, definitely on the parents' side, to maybe being a little more flexible. I'm not saying let the child run, wild and do whatever they want, but understanding that sometimes, especially these kids that need much more physical sensory input, things may look a little different for them, right? It might mean a little more activity before bed just to be able to calm versus what you would expect. So yeah, that kind of.
And I think it's really helpful to have this type of service for those of us who are like in that in-between spot. Like, my child doesn't have special needs, so it's hard to know where to go to get help, but she's definitely telling me something's not quite right.
Oh yeah.
And so, I kind of always felt like I was a little bit stuck in this weird in-between world. And I wasn't sure who to ask for help.
Oh, that's such a great point. And these are kind of the kids sometimes that are the gray areas, right? They may not actually be causing a lot of trouble at school, right? They may not be the kid that's getting a note sent home every day, but when they come home, they're falling apart, and you kind of get the brunt of it as the parent, because maybe they've had to hold it together as much as they can all day, and then they're in the safe place of home and they're just going to let it all out. Now that we're home all the time, it might be all the time. So
and as parents, we're the safe place where kids can truly express
absolutely
it
so
all.
You're going to get the good and the bad. For sure. But yeah, and then if anyone is interested, they're I'm more than happy to have them come into our it's a private Facebook group. It's called The Language of Behavior. I can give you guys a link. And honestly, I just created it more to have a community for parents just like you, who are like, I don't know what which way to go, you know, and there are families in the group that have participated in the program. And then there's other families that are, or parents that are just, you know, trying things out on their own and saying, hey, this worked for me. The visual schedule, like that was such a, you know, a great thing that we could share in the group. And then everybody's like, oh, that might work out well for this time. And I love to put like sensory, you know, things in there. If it's something that maybe you need to buy, I try to make that as you know, accessible as possible, but you can make so many things in your home. Sensory and getting outside again is so key to getting a lot of this sensory input that a lot of kids are looking for.
Yeah, well, I've learned so much from you, and I just appreciate how much you've helped me and helped me find that ability to really connect with my daughter, who is just this beautiful, spirited, wonderful power child. And both my children are amazing, obviously, but I've just really, you know, it's always been like more of a friction with my younger one, and I'm so appreciative of now having some tools that I can like feel like more like I can take a breath and relax. Like,
absolutely. It's not about always changing the child, right? It's sometimes adapting to or supporting what their needs are. And you know, I just love to do it. I love to see the changes in families and the dynamics, because we all know if everyone's happy, it makes it a lot better.
Yeah, it makes a better family everywhere, not just in our family unit, but it radiates out into the world, and it creates more connections in our community as well when we have these strong family units. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
thank you so much, and I will like share all your information.
Sounds good.
And yeah, I really appreciate our time together.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So
stay well.
Hold on one second.